And on YouTube. All right, we're moving forward in the laws of Shabbos. We're getting up to some very, very interesting ideas, laws that we're going to tackle over the next week or so. So let's bring up the text. Hold on. Let's make sure that. Okay, we're talking about still things that you could take out with things that different things that could be worn either as clothing or tachshitim or as ornaments that are something that's part of your dress, but to have just to put things on your person as a way of carrying sometimes are forbidden. Not in all cases, like we said, you could wear kind of like double sweaters and stuff if you would sometimes wear more than one sweater, and then even if the reason behind it is so you could take a sweater out and give it to someone else. So we're going through the different laws of what you can and cannot wear. The last thing we spoke about was the law 15, which is about gloves. Again, and there's different concerns. One is if when you're putting it on your person, is that really just a way of carrying? So your body's carrying it. And then there's a second idea is that although it could be that you're wearing it like a glove, the concern is there's certain things that when you're likely to take off. Like sometimes if you have certain ornaments or certain pins that you may take off to show someone else, the concern is you may take it off and then carry it in the public domain. One of those sunglasses, for instance, one of those things it means you're not carrying sunglasses, but it's very likely you'll take the sunglasses off and carry them. Same thing with gloves. And therefore, we did quote last week the opinion that I believe it was the Taz who said that a muff that has two hands is better than gloves that is separate from each hand. So if you have a muff, even if you take one hand out, the second hand is holding the muff. We spoke about also that the ruling that we had when we were in Montreal to be able to wear gloves when you're in extreme weather environment where it's almost impossible. So it's that you would take the gloves off because it's so cold. So in that case, they said to carry it, and then it wasn't a Rosh Hashanah, it was a Carmelist. To wear the gloves is permissible in these situations, but to wear gloves like as a design or a kind of a way of dress, maybe the way they once did it classy, that's another question. Now the question is a question that comes up. I think Aaron mentioned it about walking outside with a talis on Shabbos. So it says like this. Mutter lotzeis betalis mitzuyetzes bederech malvush. You can wear a talis that has tzitzis on it as long as it's derech malvush. You're wearing it as it's supposed to be worn. Aval im mikaplis seviv tzavari, but if you turn it kind of into like a scarf around your neck, which is not how one wears a talis, if that's not the way one wears a talis, then it's just a way of carrying, and you cannot wear the talis that way. It means if you want to wear talis, you would have to wear it the way it's properly being worn. There are other questions about talis in public places. If some people are in the opinion you shouldn't be wearing a talis in public places amongst Gentiles, some people are specifically wear the talis to go into shul. That's another discussion about the walking in the street with a talis, if that's okay. Some people are of the opinion not to. But we're talking about here, as far as the laws of Shabbos goes, of carrying, to wear the talis the way one wears a talis is permissible. To wear a talis as in a scarf, if it's not the way to wear it, it's prohibited. And he quotes the Magen Avraham in Shulchan Aruch 301 and the Bir Halacha, again, commentaries on this subject. Let's continue. This happens all the time, unfortunately. What happens if you have belts or something that rip? They're no longer functional as is. Can you just wear it hanging? So then and try to take it home and then fix it when you get home. So let's see. Beged sheyesh lo shtei ritzuos oy meshichos lekashram behem. If you have a garment that has two straps or strings with which it is tied, he says, or aishesh like karasim, or if it has hooks, lechabroi, kind of those kind of hooks, belts. V'nifsak echad mihem, and one of them tore off, so you can't use it anymore. You can't close it, the belt, it's a belt that wraps around, or if it's hooks, so one of the hooks fell off. You can't use it as a hook. So the question is if you're allowed to walk with those straps around you or the other side, because it's carrying, it doesn't have the function that it's made for. Even he says, if it's not really important, so you say like as if you're carrying it, it's not really valuable. If your intention is that you're going to fix it after Shabbos, obviously, to find a match and fix it, ben zugay, imkain, imkain, zeh shenishar einer batel legabe habeged, b'havik ma'aseh v'asilatzis beged. So if your intention is to fix it, so you're really just carrying it around. So until Shabbos is over, until you get home and take off your jacket, and then let it, and then you'll fix it on Saturday. Hold on, Aaron. You fix it on Saturday night. If that's your intention, so you basically aren't carrying that extra side of the strap or belt on your person until you get home. So then it's forbidden because then you're carrying on Shabbos. Hold on, Aaron. Let's just finish the law. But if you have no intention to fix it, sometimes you have kind of straps that just, it's just you're gonna leave it. Whatever, if it's not so important or it's not so noticeable, whatever. I mean, if you have some straps that are not like really essential to the garment, because although it has no function, but it's not a kind of an important thing that you're carrying around with you, it becomes just like kind of a flap or something of the garment, and it's just part of the garment. The garment does a lot of things. You have sometimes garments that have, wavy lapels or things like that. So it becomes part of it. It may not be nice, but it becomes part of the garment, and therefore it's not considered carrying. What about if it's something important, an important part of the garment? You're going meshicha shameshi. If it is such like he says, a silk cord, or keres shal kesef, or a silver clasp. So it's, even though you may not have intention to fix it, but it's still valuable, but it's not doing a function. So it can't be nullified to the garment. Alpha pisha ain't died to the sakna, even if you have no intention to fix it. And its value can't be nullified to the garment, and then you're just carrying it around and it's prohibited. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. You have a coat. Many reasons why the button could fall off, but it's cold outside, so you wouldn't wear it unbuttoned. Now, what do you do with the button, and can you wear the coat because it's no longer like a regular, like you would wear it?
No, well, okay, hold on. There is a question that people have about walking out, let's say, with jackets, coats, kapatas that have loose buttons. Because then there's two questions. One is it may fall off and you may pick it up. Next thing is if it's not functioning, like we said before, and your intention is to fix it, so then a very loose button would be almost like you're carrying it around. And about your question, I don't think that's the same thing. If you're asking about where the coat no longer has the button, so it doesn't function as well as you would like, so then then you shouldn't be wearing it. It's different, because if you have a coat, even if it's not going to close, it's a coat, it's a jacket. It's still a garment. And if you want a jacket, it's still a jacket. Like if the jacket's missing a button, is not like and the problem is that the button, missing the button kind of doesn't complete the garment. That's different than if the button is loose or the button falls out. Understand?
Okay,
Pick up the button and carry it. You definitely can't. You can't carry the button. The button is muksa now.
But okay, so what you're saying is I get to shul, I unbutton my coat to hang on the coat hanger, and the button falls off. I can leave the button in the shul, and I can wear the coat out.
Yeah. That happens all the time, unfortunately, right? Buttons fall off all the time. But the coat still has a function. The coat still has a function as a garment. The coat's still a garment. Maybe you'd like it to have the button so you'd be warmer or whatever, what have you, but it doesn't look nice. But the coat is still a garment. You can't.
Okay, but if
here we're talking about pieces that are hanging on the garment.
So what you're also saying is, if I notice that it's loose before, while it's Shabbos, and I notice it's loose, I should pick a different coat.
Yeah, it's not so simple to walk around with a very loose button on Shabbos. Yes. Let's see. Right here, he goes into the question. Oh, this is a good question. The spear button, right? So today, a lot of suits and shirts have the spear buttons, right?
Right.
But what about the spear button? The spear button that manufacturers sew onto clothing may be prohibited. See Shmir Shabbos Kalacha, right? Barbara, that's the sefer you wanted us to learn soon. So he talks about that. 18 footnote 131, and reasons given by Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal for permitting it. So Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says it's permitted, and he gives the reasons there why, which we don't have in front of us. And unless Barbara has it in her book on 18 footnote 131. So the Shemirath Shabbos says there could be issues, but Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was the posek pretty much in the previous, I would say he passed away. What was in the maybe the 90s or so. He was a posek who lived over here in Yerushalayim, right next to where I am in Shari Chesed. So if Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says it's permissible. I never heard of people taking off their extra buttons on their shirts or their suits, but he points it out that there are those who have an issue with it. Okay, Barbara, if you have it in front of you, you could check and see and let us know what's the basis of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach on that.
I don't have my books in front of me. I'm sorry,
okay.
Rabbi.
No problem. What
Let me
did you say?
just ask this, then taking off the button, the extra button is usually taken off when you need an extra button to fix one that fell off. So why would you take it off on Shabbos?
No. You definitely can't take it off on Shabbos. The question is if you'd have to remove. The questions would be if you have to remove it before Shabbos.
Well, why?
Because
you can do anything before Shabbos when it
because
comes.
you're carrying it. It has no right now. It has no purpose. It's just being carried on your garments. Like carrying. The whole question we have is that you're carrying things that you don't need. It's not part of your garment. It's like you're just taking it around with you. Because why do you have it on your garment? Because you don't never know when you're going to need it. When you need it, you're going to take it off the back of your shirt or the back of your suit, and you're going to reconnect it. So he's saying that at the end of the day, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which is one of the main poskim of the last generation, says it's permissible. The discussion about it we don't have in front of us. We'll have to check. But the bottom line is if Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says it's permissible, then that's good to go by.
Okay.
But the question is that as you have it now, you're carrying it. So it's not, you understand?
Yeah, I understand, but no one's ever questioned it or brought it up or even thought about it
Amongst
my friends.
Okay, so he's saying that the Shemir Shabbos Kehilchatah mentions that that it's an issue. He says may be prohibited, but there's some Zalman Auerbach allows for it. Okay. Now the question is not so much a wig, but I think it's more of a toupee, they call it, for a man who has a toupee. Bal hakarcha, someone who's bald. Shemanichim al rasheihen, that they put on their heads. Pishtain saruk oitzemer menufats shianira kiseir b'rasheim. They put on a toupee made out of various different materials, like he says, peanachris, that is made to look like you have here, right? Is mutar mlatzis by b'Shabbos? It's permissible to walk out within a Shabbos, l'shus rabbim, even to a public domain. Shitachshit shalahem hu. It is definitely a garment, and of course, there's no concern you would take it off. Ubevat shehuchen me'erev Shabbos. It has to be ready prepared for Shabbos. Otherwise, if it wasn't prepared for that specifically on Shabbos, it probably would be a question of muksa. Okay. Now we have the last law in this parak. And then we're going to move on to the next parak is going to be about fires, which is an interesting one. And the next parak after that, if we get there today, is going to be about the question of bathing on Shabbos. Is Hanoisa Kameya? Kameya is an amulet that people wear for Ayin Hara, for healing, for evil eye, for healing. It was a big deal in the Talmud times and maybe later times where you had a special. Again, we're learning Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. This is the shorthand of the law. The law is discussed at length in the tractate of Shabbos. So the question is who's the author of this amulet? If he's reputable, if it's just if there's any sign that any of his amulets have worked before, do people accept him as an acceptable person who writes kameyas, amulets? So, but here this is the short pen. He just doesn't go into all the details. The question is, to wear a kameh on Shabbos, is that carrying? Is that permissible? Obviously, we're talking about a place without an erev. And the question is, what is considered today even a kameh? Is a kechai necklace is a necklace, but some people have other things that they hang on their neck. Is sarach lase she'os chacham? He says in these situations you have to ask your local rabbi to find out exactly, because like I said, there's a lot of details. Who's writing? What is he writing? How is it written? How much of it is the metal? How much of it is the design, etc., etc. If you're allowed to go out within Shabbos, if you're in such a situation, so you should ask your local rabbi. Not all kameas amulets are equal. The isha. Now here's something interesting. Women would wear a stone called Sternschus. Isha hanoisis evan anikras sternschus. A woman who wears a stone that's called sternschus. And the reason she wears that stone is kadesh leitapel. It helps to make sure, kind of mystically, obviously, or in a way of ayin hara, of evil eye, that she should not miscarry. Is muteris lasis b'Shabbos? He says you're allowed to walk out with it on Shabbos. Doesn't go in again to the reasons. Yes, Barbara.
I just have a question. Why isn't wearing an amulet like that or this Steinschus, why isn't that considered superstition? I mean, that's to me.
It's a good question, but the commands was something people wore all the time. The expert writers of these things, it was a way people would. It wasn't just a superstition. The actual amulet was something that healed or protected. You have, there's a lot. We have a custom by Jewish people that we put certain things outside the doors and beds of children. There's a lot of evil spirits that like to attack children when they're babies and they're vulnerable. And till today, there's a custom. The Shiramalis. If you go to a house, you'll see that when a baby's born, if you notice, there are going to be things hanging from the front door, and then hanging in front of the bedroom's door. And it's written. It has in it a chapter of Tehillim, and it also has Kabbalistic Aramaic writings, kind of protecting the space from evil spirits. So it's a good question, but that was something that still today is being done in certain ways, maybe not as in Kameya. And again, of course, there's a lot of people Aaron, I see that you want to ask. Hold on. There's a lot of people that are charlatans in this, but that's why he says you have to ask a rabbi. And it seems like it's no question about this Sternenschuss, that's kind of an accepted thing. I'm not even sure what kind of stone it is, but it's a stone that women wear. That kind of till today. When I came into my apartment here in Eretz Yisrael, there was garlic in the windowsill. That's people hang garlic outside to keep evil spirits out.
I see.
It sounds like it's a superstition, but there are certain things that may sound like superstitions that are acceptable even according to Torah.
Okay.
Aaron, you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question, but when you brought that up, so in the Syrian community, even my wife did it. So until the baby's old enough to climb up and put it in his mouth, they put the hand symbol and a little Tehillim, and then they pin it to them. No, maybe not the Tehillim, but they pin the hand and a few other little colorful things and a Jewish star, whatever, onto the baby's clothes, and then they also hang it from the crib. But my question was, could you wear that hand symbol that they sell all over Israel and everywhere?
Again, like he says, you have to ask Rabbi. I'm not sure what the chamsa, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the chamsa. The chamsa means the word chamsa is kind of from the word chomesh, 5. That's why it's like the hand of 5 fingers. So it's you have to check the sources of that. That's more of a Sephardic a Sephardic custom. But again, yeah, these are today, and also the question is today the chamsa kind of is also a piece of jewelry. They make it like a jewelry, so it could be kind of not so much of an amulet like it is a jewelry. But yeah, that's really what we're asking. Some people have they'll have other things that they hang on them. They'll have I get advertised all the time about people who hang. The Rebbe gave out coins. The Rebbe used to give out nickels, dimes. At different times. Unfortunately, I didn't keep them. I spent them when I was a kid. I would give, dimes and nickels. So I see that people make necklaces out of them. It's a question on Shabbos if you could wear it. Yes, Barbara.
Just gonna say, I work with a woman who is Muslim, and she wears a hamsa. And I didn't know she was Muslim. And I said, oh, that's a Jewish thing. And she said, no, it's a Muslim thing. So
yeah. So a lot of that's why the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's because it's discussed so much at length in the Talmud, and there's so many charlatans, and there's a lot of things where and in these kind of things, like you said, what's in the field of superstitions, obviously things could get out of control.
I don't know. I'll just say this. I don't know if my wife was right, but I brought the same thing up to my wife. I said, that's like a Muslim thing. And she says, like all things Jewish, everyone wants to steal them and use them for their own.
Okay, so it has to be examined and studied more in detail of what the chamsa is. But again, I'm not sure if the chamsa falls under an amulet if it's that today it's ready to just a piece of jewelry. I mean, is an amulet that much? Is a chamsa any different really than a chai necklace, right?
Well, my wife says it has a lot of meaning and it wards off bad things, and people who wear it get good out of it.
I mean, again, I'm not enough of an authority on the chamsa to give an
You
opinion.
make it look pretty and they make it look like jewelry.
Yeah, and so I'm going to leave it at that. All right, now we're going into the laws. Rebecca, any questions before we go on to the next chapter? Anyone? Okay, so we're going to go now to the laws of chapter 85, the laws pertaining to a fire that breaks out on Shabbos. Unfortunately, this is something that happens, unfortunately, again, and it shouldn't happen all the time. Whether it's around Hanukkah time when things, but just unfortunately on Shabbos, people have fires lit in their house and they leave and they're not careful or what have you. I mean, we just unfortunately had a really unfortunate story in New Jersey in the Chabad house that just literally on Friday night burnt down to the ground. So it's really the question is, what do you do? And today you have the fire department. Those days houses, an entire city could burn down if once a fire starts. So in today it's still dangerous, but it's less dangerous than maybe it was because of our great team of fire department and all that the precautions we've put in and around houses to protect it. But it's still happening. California fires, there's fires that happen once it starts. It spreads fast. And the question is, when you have to be a chassid shaita, when you have to be a fool who thinks, that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing on Shabbos, when there's any life endangerment, even a question of life, you immediately put out the fire, no questions asked. But what do you do if it happens? He says, Im chas v'shalom, nafla dleika b'Shabbos. If God forbid, heaven forbid, a fire breaks out on Shabbos. Chashu rabbeinu zerchanim levracha. So he said, our sages were concerned. In the house, the family means the balabais and his family, his wife, or what have you, that are in the house where there is the fire. Im isasku bahatsala, if they're going to try to save things in their house, they don't want things to burn. So they're going to be in a panicky, kind of hasty situation, not thinking clear, basically, not seeing things clearly in their overwhelmed moment. They may forget it's Shabbos. And they're going to put out the fire. Means there's we're talking about here in a situation where there's absolutely zero concern for life. It's not going to spread. Whatever it is, we're talking about a situation, as soon as there's any question of that it may turn into fire, you don't just stand there watching it and wait till it becomes dangerous. The rabbis forbid a person to save things that are permissible to touch, to take him into a place of permissible movement, meaning to take it out to the street, obviously not allowed to, but that you can take it out to your yard. For the rabbis instituted, you could only save what you need right now, and to take it even in the permissible place. Ketzad, for instance, Shabbos. Let's say the fire falls out on Friday night, before the Friday night meal. So you would have to eat Friday night, Shabbos day, and Shabbos afternoon, the 3 meals. So matzah, mazon, shal shudis, you could save enough food. Let's say you have food, your fridge is full of food for the next week. You can't take out everything from your fridge. You can only take out enough food for every person to have 3 meals. Haraya la'adam as much as each person requires. Haraya lebehema, and what an animal needs, it means anyone that you have to feed, people from your family, workers in your family, service people in your family, animals in your household, etc. And what happens if the fire breaks out after the Friday night meal and Shacharis in the morning, before your Shabbos lunch? So then you save Maza and Shtei Sudas for 2 meals. If the fire breaks out in the afternoon before your 3rd meal, is Maza and Suda Achas, you would save only enough food for 1 meal. What happens if you have a basket full of food? You're not going to have to start taking out only for 3 meals. Going sal mali kikares. You have a basket full of bread. Chavis malei yayin or what do they call it? A barrel full of wine. So you don't have to just pour out enough for 3 meals, or etc. Given shemaitzi pamachas mutter, you could just take it one at a time because you're not taking it out basket and basket. You're just taking out one basket. In the basket, there could be enough food for 5 people for 20 meals, but that's all in one basket. Then it's okay. Also, you could take like a sheet and just put everything into a sheet without being calculated and just take it out, even though there's a lot more food than you would need. Also, you're allowed to take out dishes, anything you need for that day, toilet paper, whatever. Again, this is very, very, you have to be very careful with this because today, the concern obviously is most fires very fastly go from being just a fire to being a hazard for lives, not just for your house. It means if you know if the fire person is standing right there, again, these situations, it's very unlikely scenario where you're letting your house burn down and zero concern for life. But in the event that that's the case, and because the owner is overwhelmed and we're scared the person's not going to be careful on Shabbos, so then you're only allowed to take out what you need for Shabbos, even though you could take out permissible moving things into permissible space. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. Using your example of the house and it's on fire, can you take out your Purim scroll and your Talmud?
Oh, we're going to get to that. Let's wait till we get to that. But a very good question. Okay, so the first thing is only that which is needed for the day is permitted to be rescued. Footnote number 1. Some argue that this prohibition applies only where the salvaged objects are carried to your neighbor's unroofed yard, which borders a public domain. For there is concern that you may also carry into the public domain, but to your own yard or your friend's house, you may salvage all the food and items you are able. Okay, that's the Shulchan Aruch, says that there's another opinion. Number 2, the Mishnah Berurah rules that you may be lenient since the prohibition involved is only rabbinic, and therefore it's only rabbinic that you may take it out. So therefore, the Mishnah Berurah is makel to take out more than what you need. However, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, rules that you must be stringent. I just want to say that a story that my father tells that we just celebrated this week the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Rebbe Chabad's birthday on the 20th of Sivan of Mar Cheshvan. So my father said that after World War I, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab was talking at a little harsh talk about that he didn't feel that the war, World War I, kind of brought out the best. Sometimes in a hard situation, people find Torah mitzvahs more. And he was finding that it wasn't that way. So my great-grandfather was at the talk of the Rebbe Rashab, and he asked the Rebbe Rashab if he could tell a story that when he's a Rav in the city of Rakashik, that the city of Rakashik, which is in Lithuania, had to evacuate in World War I, the oncoming German army, so they had to evacuate on Shabbos. And then it wasn't a fire, but they had to evacuate. And people left everything behind. Even though leaving it behind on Shabbos, they lost everything. But in order to keep the Shabbos, they left everything behind. So this is a big deal about how one stands up for Shabbos. Okay. Number two is we're talking about over here. Shabbos Eve before Shabbos, you may rescue enough food for 3 meals, food fit for humans. Number 2, he says that enough for 3 meals for each member of your household. Okay, he's just clarifying that not just enough for one person, but if you're taking up per meal per person, obviously. Okay, maybe it's not so obvious. Footnote number 3 is fit for animals, since you yourself may not eat before feeding your animals. So the Tosfos and Shabbos says, it means he's asking, why are you allowed to take out food for your animals? So the Tosfos explains, obviously we have to see the full text of the Tosfos, but he's saying over here, he's giving reference to the Tosfos, that's not because you're allowed to take out food for your animals, but because you're not allowed to eat until you feed your animals. So it's kind of in a way of taking out food for yourself. All right, that's what I understand he means from the Tosfos. Footnote number 4 is If it's in a barrel of wine or a basket, so even though you have more in the barrel than you need and more in the basket than you need, otherwise you may rescue only enough wine for 3 meals. You may rescue other liquids to have sufficient amount for the entire day. Obviously, if you want to drink water, you could take out a few cases of water if that's what you may need. Again, you don't have to be strict. Do I need one piece of gefilte fish or 2 pieces of gefilte fish? This is not the time to get exactly strict, to go into, to get strict on your diet. Number 5 is, it says similarly, if you spread a sheet, it's permissible. So it says, according to some, this applies to loose food, not in containers. It means you can't just take a sheet and throw in cases containered food, because then you kind of just, saving it. Here we're talking about like just grabbing challah and things and putting it into a sheet. That's okay. So according to some, he says, this applies to loose food, not in containers. If the food is in containers, then each container is considered separately, and therefore you can't bring it as collectively. Others do not distinguish between loose and container food, which is the heel of the David. Okay. Again, I just have to I want to be very careful, because some people become like what's called a chassid shaita. Fire is a very dangerous thing. They spread fast. They're very dangerous. So we're talking about a situation where it's 100% clear that the issue over here is not life-threatening. Okay. For law number 2. Now, let's say, okay, we're in a situation where it's not life-threatening and your house is burning down, so you could only take out for 3 meals max, and the drinks and the foods and the dishes. So, but is there any way kind of to manipulate the situation to get some more things out? So he says, let's say you have neighbors. You say, listen, you leave your food at home and eat my food. It's going to burn anyways. So you can tell others to come also save for themselves. So he says that the person could take out whatever they want to take out, and the vessels along with it. And he says that they belong to the rescuer. I think he means for him to use on Shabbos. I wonder if you take out dishes, if the dishes remain the ownership of, it doesn't mean, the halacha is if I take out spoons and forks and plates that are not disposable on Shabbos, and then you don't have to break it, you keep it, right? Because you took it out permissibly. So the question is, when he says these belong to the mitzvah, to the savor, you have to see, does it mean that even after Shabbos it belongs, or just on the Shabbos itself? Why? So he follows up. Aaron, we're going to get you at the end of the law. Oh, so he says it actually belongs to this person who rescues it even after Shabbos, because with the fact that the person, it's anyways going to be burnt, so for all practical purposes, the owner made it hefker, made it ownerless, right? When a person says, whatever is in my house is ownerless, if someone comes and takes it, that person becomes the owner. So when the person took out the dishes for himself or herself on Shabbos, they now own the dishes. Vimu Yerushalayim, but if he's God-fearing, or she's God-fearing, and you return to the owner what you've saved, if you save dishes and other things, cups, bechers, right? If a person is only allowed to save one Kiddush cup, you have a whole bunch of silver Kiddush cups, you can tell other people to take their own Kiddush cup. So the person can say, well, I'm keeping it because the law is I'm allowed to keep it. I took it out, you made it hefker. So the halacha says, if he's a God-fearing, and he gives it back to the original owner, because you didn't make it ownerless willingly, you had no choice because it's Shabbos. He can't. The person can say, well, listen, I had a nice meal in my house. You came knocking on the door saying there's a fire, come save things for yourself, so to say. And I went, I stopped my meal and I took out your food and I took out your dishes for myself because they were ownerless, and I'm giving it back to you because it's the right thing to do, but pay me for my time. I basically helped you. So it says you could take schar hatzal, you could take reward for the things that for the rescue, so to say. Schar Shabbos is not considered as if you took money on Shabbos. Because really it belongs to you. So the fact that you're kind of giving it back to that person, it's kind of like an after Shabbos, it's not direct earning money on Shabbos. When we call Makim, nevertheless, he says, means chasidus. So the Yirah Shemayim, that's God-fearing. What does it mean to be a chassid? To be a person who is acting in the way of a kind person. You should not take reward. If you help someone save things on Shabbos, that's kind of, it's not a good vibe. Alpha Pishain is Schar Shabbos, even though it's not about Schar Shabbos, why not? It's not considered as if you took money on Shabbos, because we said you saved it for the person, and therefore it's not considered money for Shabbos, you helped them. But he says it's not a chesed, it's not a kind thing to do. Why? Because a chassid has to be careful, even if there's the slightest taint of kind of taking reward for Shabbos, you shouldn't do it. So he's not saying it's because, you should do a favor as a favor, but yes, you did stop your meal, and yes, it was inconvenient for you, and yes, you ran into the guy's burning house to take out food and dishes, and you're giving it back to them because it's the right thing to do. And in theory, you should be getting paid for your efforts. That's all right. But because it's a little bit kind of tainted by the idea of Schar Shabbos, taking reward on Shabbos, better don't. Okay, Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I don't get the container thing. Let me explain. Even if I go to Meal Mart, everything's put into a container, and everything's put in such a way, except for the salads, that they can go on a bleck. So my point is, even some people don't buy the gefilte fish like you boil, or the long. They buy the ones in the containers. Pickles are in a container. So I don't get it. You can't take the containers out, or you.
No. So in that case, but I think what he means to say is, is you can't just, let's say you have 30 cans of tuna. You can't just throw 30 cans of tuna into your thing. I mean, each can separately is its own thing. Means if you want pickles, you don't have to put your hand in the jar and take out 3 pickles, because that's like the wine that's in the barrel. But you can't put in 3 jars of pickles. You don't need 3 jars of pickles, right? You can't just means, but if you're just taking loose food, that's one thing. But if you can't just put it in a whole bunch of jars, and you're not eating all those jars just because you could fit it into the sheet. That's that opinion of the Magen Avram. Others don't make that difference. They say whatever you could fit in a sheet, you could fit in a sheet. But jarred food, basically, the question is like this. We said before that a barrel of wine, you don't have to take out 5 cups of wine. You just take out the barrel, right?
Right.
Or let's say, in the case of today, let's say you're not going to drink a whole bottle of wine. You don't have to pour yourself a cup and walk out. Take out the bottle of wine. If you have leftovers, you have leftovers. But you can't just take out 5 bottles of wine. That's what Magen Avram is saying.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see the footnotes. You can ask others to come and rescue things. If it is essential to say for yourselves that you're rescuing for, again, I just want to be, again, I'm repeating myself because I think it's very important, because I've seen people get silly in these things, is when you have a fire, unless you're absolutely 100% sure that the situation is safe, you put it out. We've had situations in New York and in other places where people start running to the Rav, to the rabbi, and they start waiting for the fire department when they could just avoid the problem by putting it out quickly with a pitcher of water. Fires spread fast and become dangerous very fast. And if not dangerous for you, dangerous for your neighbors. So unless you're 100% certain that fire is not going to cause any damage in as far as smoke damage of people or other damage for people, you put it out on Shabbos. So it's like this. It is essential to say to yourselves, so that it's for yourselves. You have to tell them that you're saving the food for yourselves, so that it be valid renunciation. How do you pronounce that? Of ownership. Magen Avram means you have to actually say that they're saving for themselves. They can't just tell them come save food and kind of assume that they know they're saving for themselves. Okay, here's a question of Shabbos wages. You're allowed to take, if you give it back to them, the dishes, you're allowed to take Shabbos wages for your. It's not considered Shabbos wages if you take money for the rescue. It is prohibited to receive pay for any services performed on Shabbos. Again, we discussed this before about Jewish people who work on Shabbos if they get paid. In this case, if the rescuer returned the items before Shabbos ended, he may not accept a fee. So the Bir Halacha says that when can you accept a fee for rescuing? If you come back after Shabbos, it's like you're getting paid for what you did after Shabbos. But if on Shabbos itself you come back, give back the dishes, then you can't expect a fee because the whole transaction happened over Shabbos. Again, we're not going to go into this. Is not the time to go into the question of other times people take fees for Shabbos, even as much as a person who reads the Torah who gets paid on Shabbos. So if you know how that doesn't work as fees on Shabbos. But in the discussion of fees on Shabbos, in this case, returning things that you've saved Although you saved it for yourselves and you ate on those dishes, but after Shabbos, you've washed the dishes and you want to return it, you're allowed to, and you're allowed to say, by the way, it'd be nice if you gave me a little bit compensation of my time and efforts to go and run into your house and save your dishes. Even though you made it ownerless and all that. Since legally it is all his nevertheless. It is therefore considered that the rescuer is selling that which is that which is his, rather than receiving a fee for performing a service on Shabbos. So Rashi explains, why could you take a fee? Because it's yours, and when you give it back to them after Shabbos, according to us, the Magen Avraham, after Shabbos, the Bir Halacha, so then it's as if it's a new transaction that happens after Shabbos, because it's yours. When you saved it, now you're giving it back. It's kind of you're selling it back. All right. No, number 9 is not here. Okay. He says, all this applies. You can't take food out to the public domain or to a Carmelis. If you're talking about a place that outside your house would be a forbidden place, you're not allowed to save anything, even food that you would need to eat that day. Where you could put as many clothing as you want, even if you're going to public domain. In that case, he says you can put on 5 sweaters, 6 suits. Then you can take it out even to public domain, not just the Carmelis. Let's say the fire is burning slowly, smoke damage. You could go in and out constantly, taking out the clothing on your person. And others can come take it as well. Let's see footnote number 9. Even an entire day. The necessity of putting the clothing on is to serve as a constant reminder not to extinguish the fire. It means by putting the clothing on, it's a kind of, you're doing things that are showing that you're very conscious that you're not allowed to put the fire out. Carrying the clothing is permitted only for clothes needed for Shabbos. So says the Mishnah Berurah. Footnote number 10, you could tell others. Again, you have to add this is for yourself, like we said last week, in the previous halacha. Okay, let's go a little further. Yes, Aaron, you're on mute.
Yeah, can you take it off when you get out because you might be too hot?
Yeah, he says. You take it off.
Okay.
All right. V'habatim she'ein sham dadleka. What happens if the fire is not spread yet, but it may spread, and the neighbors are concerned it may spread? So they're not allowed, again, we're talking about a case where there's 100% certainty, there's no concern for life. So you're talking about that the fire is maybe spreading, everyone's awake, everyone gets out of the house, but the neighbor now is not in a panic because there's no fire in the neighbor's house, but the neighbors are cautious and wants to prevent any of his or her property being damaged. They're not so overwhelmed under pressure because there is no fire yet on their property. So then, because we started off the law saying that the reason why we're very strict with the fire in the person's house is because the fire is burning fast and people are overwhelmed, they're not thinking straight, clear. But the person who has a fire going and not in their house, and they're scared it may reach their house, they're not so overwhelmed. Is mutarim lahatzel kol davar lemakim. It says is mutarim lahatzel kol davar lemakim shemutarim lahitzi l'sham, that you could take anything that's permissible to move to a place that's permissible to move, even if you don't need it for Shabbos. Yesh oimrim, and those who say the gam mois, even money. Let's say you have a wallet full of money, ushar dvar mikarm, and other valuables. Alpha pi shehem muktzah, even though typically they're considered muktzah, means you're not allowed to touch them on Shabbos. Murtil hatzila min ahefsid gadol pisoimi, you're allowed to save them from this sudden great loss. There's an old burn. If there's a fire or a flood, or you're scared robbers are going to come. If you put them together with something permissible, and then they become a bus, they're carried along with the permissible. So if you could take the wallet, kind of pick it up at something that's permissible, and use that to carry the money, and then you could take it and you could carry it out. Again, we're talking about a person who's clear-headed and not in a situation of being overwhelmed. That's only, he says, only in this situation you could, however, however, under other circumstances, there is no allowance whatsoever to handle muksa in this manner. It means this idea to move it with something permissible, you can't just do it in a regular situation. If you forgot your wallet, you just want to move it. Only when we're talking about you're scared of a sudden great loss, and again, it's not a case where the fire is in your house, so then you're more clear-headed, then you could do it that way. There's those who are even more lenient, that they allow for it to be even carried in such a situation of them just to pick it up without putting it with something permissible. Because when there's a great sudden loss, then the laws of muktzah are not applicable, so they say. But it's still not allowed to take it out into a prohibited space. It means if you're able to move in a permissible space, then you're allowed to. Yes, it's very good to have Ariel back. We had him back already yesterday in the class. Rebecca saying, welcome, Ariel. Okay, footnote number 11. It says...
Thanks, yes. Appreciate it. Thanks, you're welcome.
Sure. Since the owner of the house that's near the fire is less panicky and are less likely to forget themselves and extinguish the fire, right? So a person's not so panicky, so you're able to think clear-headed or a little more clear-headed. Permitted anything to carry. Perhaps others may rescue the owner's objects since they are calmer and are unlikely to forget themselves and extinguish the fire, the Mishnah Berurah and the Chai Adam. It seems like what he's talking about over here is talking about even in the house where there is a fire. So the house that there is a fire, we said the owners can't take things out because they're overwhelmed, but someone else can maybe take even valuables out or things that are permissible because I think that's what it means, because they're less likely to put out the fire. Okay, footnote number 13, and then we're going to open up for questions and we'll end the class here. So he says, footnote number 13, he says, there's no allowance whatsoever to handle muksa, according to that opinion, only in a case of a sudden loss. Where there's no threat of loss, placing food on muksa objects is not permitted to handling it. But in the case of sudden loss, there's those who say, without placing the food, you could also do it. 15, he says, because there's a great sudden loss. In other words, where there is a panic situation, however, in a situation such as where rain is involved, muksa may not be handled, the Mishnah Berurah says. The question is the difference between flood or rain? I guess like rain is not sudden. Rain is normal. Flood is not regular, it's the flood. But rain that comes in and does water damage through the rain, that doesn't allow for you to move something that's muksa. So if you have rain that's coming into your front door or your window and doing damage, that you can't move muksa for, because you should have been prepared for the rain. It's not sudden. But if a flood comes, that's not regular. Okay. Oh, wow, long one. So this is involved, it's a prohibited of muksa, says in the case of a great sudden loss, the laws of muksa are set aside. There is great controversy concerning this statement of the author that says that muksa in a case of sudden great loss is permissible or is not an issue. The Ran in Masechet, the Ran is one of the early responsa time on the Talmud. In Masechet Shabbos writes that monetary loss alone is not sufficient grounds to dispense with the prohibition of muksa. Monetary loss is of avail only to prevent the transgression of a deiraisa biblical prohibition. In other words, where due to fear of loss, the person may transgress the deiraisa prohibition of extinguishing the fire on Shabbos. It's kind of a contradiction. He says, the Ran says, let me just read this again. The Ran in Masechet Shabbos writes that monetary loss alone is not sufficient grounds to dispense with the prohibition of muksa. Monetary loss is of avail only to prevent the transgression of deraisa, biblical prohibition. Where there's a concern that you're going to do a biblical prohibition by putting out the fire because you don't want your money to burn. In other words, where due to the fear of loss, the person may transgress deraisa, prohibition of extinguishing the fire in Shabbos, it may be more lenient. So you're more lenient if we're concerned that a person may violate a biblical violation. But we're not going to let a person violate just like that to disregard muksa, which is a rabbinic, because if he violates it, he violates it. But when we're scared of a daraisa, then there's something else. The Chassam Sofer, however, cites the Bach, Bach is another. These are all rabbinic authorities. Cites the Bach that where great loss is involved, even the Rabbanon prohibition of muksa is dispensed with. I mean, again, depending on the severity of what you're concerned the person may do, is where we're more lenient. If we're scared a person is going to transgress a da'iraisa, so we're more careful to allow the person to carry the muksa. But if we're concerned the person is just going to transgress the rabbanon, we're not so careful, a rabbinic. So, but the Chassam Sofer says that whatever it is, that if we're scared the person is going to transgress, we're more lenient when it comes to muksa. The Magen Avram rules leniently that monetary loss is of avail only where a non-active prohibition such as speech is involved, but an active transgression such as handling muksa is prohibited. Similarly to carrying the Magen Avram rules leniently that monetary loss is of avail only where the non-active prohibition such as speech is involved, but an active transgression such as handling muksa is prohibited. Similarly, carrying the object to a commerce would also be prohibited. Okay. We have different opinions of what you could do. It's not so clear. We have to go over this last footnote in more length. I want to look at it more in length from the background. Let's just do 17. He said, okay, see footnote number 16. So the question really in footnote number 16 is how responsive are we to people's people's overwhelming need to protect their valuables? If we're scared if we're going to be too strict with someone, the person is going to violate a biblical prohibition on Shabbos, we will be more relaxed on certain rabbinic prohibitions to allow for the person to not put out the fire, right? If a person is going to be, you can't touch anything, they're just going to put the fire out. Well, if we have a way to protect the person's valuables without them putting out the fire, so we'll be more lenient on the rabbinic prohibitions to protect, so to say, the biblical transgression. Because if we're scared that when it comes to money and extreme valuables, a person is just going to act. Means if a person's not sudden, if it's not a sudden loss, so you should have been prepared. But where a person was not expecting this loss, right? You have your wallet in your drawer. You put it away properly. Now the house is about to burn down, and they're telling them you can't carry. The person's just going to put out the fire. I'm not letting my whole house burn down. All my valuables go out. So we try to find a way to kind of relax the person. Let your house burn down, but take out your jewelry and your money, your checkbooks, your credit cards, whatever else is valuable to you. All right. Any questions on this? We have to go over this law, I think, again before we start next week. And next week we'll talk about the question Aaron had on Clay Kodesh on taking out Sfarim and Tefillin on Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, so you said, excuse me, can't take out money, but I'm asking.
No. He's saying there's certain ways that you can.
Oh, so like a pushka box, your son's tuition, but just loose cash sitting in the house, no.
He doesn't make that. He says that there's different rulings that if in a place that's permissible, you could take out muksa, whether it's putting something that's permissible to carry, or even just to carry it, to take it out to a safe place. Again, not putting it in a public domain, so you can move it on Shabbos. It doesn't go into saying if it's your kid's tuition or it's a tzedakah box.
Okay, so now my
I tell you the concern is when a person is not expecting something to happen, you get like very protective of your valuables. And
Okay.
we're scared the person is going to do something rash. So we could rather find a way for the person to calm down. And it's not talking about just your kid's tuition or the tzedakah box.
Okay, now my question is, you said this is all to calm him down so he doesn't put out the fire, but if it was me, I wouldn't go in the house for anything unless it was like a kitchen, like let's say it was just in my toaster oven. Okay, but even then, I would try to put out whatever fire it was so that it didn't spread for harming of not just property, but whatever life is next door.
Again, that's why I said you have to be very. You have to. A lot of times, situate fires that become very dangerous on Shabbos is because the person either ran to the rabbi or waited for the fire department, and it ended up spreading fast and causing either loss of life or danger. So you have to be very certain that there's no concern of loss of life here.
Now, my question is,
I don't want to. I don't want to sit there and just make a blanket statement, but
I-
I just seen it too many times where people it gets out of a fire gets out of control very fast, and it can become very dangerous very fast. So you just have to be just have to be more careful.
now the last question: are you allowed to grab your phone and call emergency?
Yes, of course, call the emergency, the fire department, because again, we don't live in a situation today. There's too many fires that start off with a cigarette, never mind with something else, that could just really cause harm of life. You have these fires in California. They started innocently. Imagine you let it go until someone call the fire department. Of course, call.
Most of the fires that I hear about in New York, Brooklyn, from religious families, it's because they have little kids and they knock over the candles.
Okay, I'm not getting into the whys and the whats.
No, but it doesn't matter. But I'm saying, you were saying smoking. Yeah, I know people smoke, but beyond that, most people don't smoke on Shabbos.
No, I'm saying, I'm not talking about Shabbos. I'm talking about you have sometimes where a person's in there's a wildfire that started because someone was
Yeah.
taking a hike and threw the cigarette to the bushes. Yes, Rebecca.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this and I just didn't hear it, but what about like a Shabbos appliance, like if your hot plate is um like sparking or smells like the wire is burning or
Pull the
something.
plug. Pull the plug.
You're allowed to do that.
Again, I don't easily give a psak. I usually tell you to ask your rabbi, but I don't want. These are situations that I've seen too
It's
many
like
times.
pikuach nefesh,
Look,
right?
again, the electric fires. We had a story not too many. What was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago. What happened to that family in Borough Park when the hot plate caught on fire.
Yeah,
Just
right.
turn it off. There's not a time to be to try to. We don't have time
Right.
to call and find out halacha.
My
Also, can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
Um, with the Shabbos candles, like one time, I don't know, it just looked like the candle was gonna like burn the glass thing that it was like the side of the glass was getting all black and there was smoke. Like in a case like that, are you allowed to blow out the candle?
Okay. No, it's okay. That you have to be careful. Putting out a fire is a deraisa, is biblical. So we have that all the time where my wife and my wife lights olive oil, and olive oil is olive oil, and we have the floating wicks, and a lot of times those wicks, the actual what do they call it? Cork catches on fire, so it's a little bigger than the fire you would like. And like you said, it makes a little bit of a fire. We keep a very strong eye on it. I'm not just going to put it out so fast because usually they just burn out. But if it means to be, gun ho, quickly to put out a fire in Shabbos is not allowed. You have to be careful. But you definitely monitor it. But if you're not comfortable and really feeling like just not you're not overreacting and there's a legitimate concern. Again, if you have your candles underneath a photo frame and you're scared the frame is now going to catch on fire because the fire that's lit is bigger than you would have liked, it's now like a little torch. So okay, if you start moving, well, you can move your picture frame. But to put out a fire is biblical. You have to be careful. But if you see it, when we're talking about a proper fire starts to spread, just put it out. We had once in our house, the fire, the candles fell down, and then a big, the whole plate glass started to go on fire. And some,
Oy.
a guy grabbed the water and turned it on. He was, he wasn't going to wait. That very fast could turn into something dangerous. In your glass that's turning black, you keep a strong eye. Maybe, fill up a pitcher of water. Have it ready in a case where you feel uncomfortable.
Okay. Thank you.
It does
I was
happen.
gonna say
Go.
one thing. You said
Yes.
ask our rabbi. So we I don't know how it came up, but whatever. He says, don't be so machmir on Shabbos if it's to save someone's life.
100%. That's what I'm saying. If again, sometimes people get overreact also. You have to be, I get nervous every time I see those fires. I get nervous, and that it may turn something fast. So you could grab a pitcher of water, and be ready to act fast, very fast. But you have to remember that putting out a fire when it's not necessary is a biblical prohibition.
But how do you know if it's not necessary?
Okay, fine. So if you have a lot of questions, just put it out. And I don't want to take responsibility of people violating Shabbos. But if you're genuinely concerned that it's going to spread, but just to think, you have time usually, like something like that, for it to get, for that to turn into fire. Usually, you could put it again. I don't want to take responsibility either way, but you have to, if you're really uncomfortable, that's what you want to do. But there's a lot of times where there's a fire, it will burn itself out. It's a little bigger than you would like, but especially Hanukkah's coming up, like you said. You have to be very careful. Hanukkah, there's the Hanukkah menorah. But again, the way to protect yourself in this space is think before where you put your Hanukkah menorah on Shabbos. Make sure there's nothing in the way. Don't take any chances. If you have shades near your Hanukkah candles, remove them, tie them. Make your house safe. Don't create a situation where you're irresponsible and then you're left with having a question, do you have to put out a fire on Shabbos? So when Hanukkah is coming around now, when people have the menorahs and they're here and there's kids running around, be safe. Make sure that your Shabbos candles are in a safe place. There's nothing around it, close to it that could catch on fire. Plan ahead. Be careful, even be extra careful. And then you'll be in a more protected space than in having a situation that develops on you. All right, guys. Laila Tov, have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.